Om Vishwan Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyanya Janta Gadam Pashyannatmani Mayaya Vahe Yatha Nidraya Yasakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namadam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtam Shaktin Jatatputra Parasharancha Vyasam Shubham Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padmapadancha Hastamalakancha Shishyam Tantotakam Vartikakaramanyaan Asmat Gurun Santatamanatosmi Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaran Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Pratau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Parabrahmanishtam Swato Dharmanishtam Ahimsaikanishtam Swashishye Sujushtam Yatinam Varishtham Gurunam Garishtham Dayananda Rupam Madacharya Mide Namah Śrī Paramarthaya Sansaradhyasanashine Shrotriya Brahmanishthaya Tasmai Brahmavide Namaha Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. I welcome you all to the second class of the Atma Bodha series. In the last class, we started off with the question, why self-knowledge? And we imagined that a person was asking us this question, why do I need self-knowledge? Because I know myself very well. And he rattles out the entire biography in the process. In that context, we saw the story of a poor man who was visited by a Mahatma. And when the Mahatma asked him, what object is that which you have in that room, the back of your house? He said, I've been seeing that stone since my childhood. And he rattled out an entire biography of the stone. That it is right on that broken table, underneath the dusty fan, beside the dirty broom, near the soiled cloths, near the dustbin. He said a lot of things about this topic. And when he was asked, what is that stone? You're telling me a lot of things about the stone, but you have not told me what is that. He said, it's some worthless stone. So even though he rattled out the entire biography of the stone, he had missed something very significant about it, which he understood only when he examined the stone and when he wiped off the dirt. Only then he realized what he was missing, that it was an invaluable gem. And just that knowledge removed his poverty, all of his struggle due to the poverty. That he thought he was very poor, even though he was really well. So similarly, we tell the person who rattles out his entire biography in terms of his body, in terms of his family, in terms of his profession, possession. body, mind, family, profession. He can tell a lot of details about it. We tell him you missed something extremely, extremely significant about yourself. And the knowledge of which changes the game completely. It's a game changer. So this is exactly why we said that we need self-knowledge. And why does a human being commit a mistake? If there's something so significant about me, why don't I know? Why do I mistake myself to be something else? We took the example of the rope and the snake. When is the rope mistaken for the snake? When the samanya jnanam is there, but the vishesha jnanam is not there. When one sees that there is something, but doesn't know what that something is. Similarly, the human being is a highly self-conscious being. He knows very clearly that I am. This much he knows very clearly. The samanya jnanam that I am is there. But the vishesha jnanam, who or what I am, if it is not there, then the conditions are ripe for a mistake. The human being comes to a judgment about oneself, comes to a conclusion about oneself, without really knowing who or what one really is. Therefore, the most generalized conclusion we see across the spectrum of all the human beings, we were to generalize the conclusion, and it would be that I am deficient, I am wanting, I am inadequate, I am apurva. Now, the human being justifies all of this. Why? Because it says, I, as my body, I am inadequate. The body is limited. The mind is limited. My family has inadequacies. My profession has inadequacies. My possessions have inadequacies. And therefore, I am inadequate. And the interesting thing is that he cannot stand being inadequate. He cannot stand being inadequate. Therefore, I try to free myself of this inadequacy or apurnatvam because I cannot stand it. Exactly like a particle entering my eye. I cannot be comfortable with it until I do something about it. Therefore, I try everything to remove it. I become very restless because of this. Therefore, what does a human being do? The human being tries to remove the inadequacy that he sees in himself through pursuits in the world, through the pursuit of artha, security, through the pursuit of kamaha, sense pleasures, and through the pursuit of dharma, which is an ethical lifestyle combined with prayer and worship, etc. Why? For my future artha and kama, so that I get better situations in future. But then all of these pursuits, they can never seem to make me purnaha. They can never seem to make me adequate as I expect. I expect that these pursuits will remove my inadequacies, but that never seems to happen. There is no lasting solution. We saw that in the field of artha, every gain also involves some loss. Because one can gain something in this world only if one invests something. This person is longing for a house, he gets a house. But in the process now, he has to service the mortgage every month. And because of this, he is constrained to work. So what? He has to pay the bills. Or he strives for a promotion, he even gets that promotion. But that promotion keeps him away from family because he gets more responsibilities or he has to do more travel. Keeps him away from home food that he likes a lot. We said that every gain of this sort involves some loss. And secondly, the pursuit of pleasures, kamaha, it only leads to some fleeting sense of fulfillment. Sense of fulfillment is not lasting. In spite of these pursuits, one is back to square one. Like we said, it's like fixing up this ball which has some depressed edge. Plastic ball, you try to fix this plate, it becomes deformed somewhere else. You try to fix that, it becomes deformed somewhere else. So, in spite of all my pursuits and all my accomplishments, the conclusion that I am deficient, I am wanting, I am inadequate, I am purnaha continues. And I cannot drop my seeking for purnatvam, seeking to be adequate, complete, full, free of limitations. I cannot drop this urge. Well, we said it is not a cultivated desire. It is not a cultivated desire like the desire for space travel or the desire for bungee jumping. If those desires enter my mind, then I, through reasoning and through the use of my will, I can drop it. But the seeking for Purnatvam, I cannot drop it. It's not under my control. It is one of those natural urges, exactly like hunger or thirst. Therefore, I am in a very difficult situation. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. The conclusion that I am apurnaha stands like a rock. And then I try to get purnatvam from the world, but the world is a hard place. I cannot become purnaha, no matter what I try in the world. So I cannot sit on the rock. I cannot sit on the conclusion that I am apurnaha and be okay with it because I try to remove the sense of apurnatva. And I cannot go to the world and try to become purnaha because the world cannot make me purnaha. All these pursuits cannot make me purnaha, and nor can I drop my seeking for purnatva. The human being is restlessly struggling and struggling in between the rock and the hard place, trying to get out of this. Is there any way that I can become purnaha? What is the solution? So as we said, that when one has eliminated the impossible, then whatever is left, no matter how improbable, must be examined because that is probably holding the key to the solution. Therefore, if I am clear that I can never become Purnaha through any of the pursuits of Arthaha, Kamaha, and Dharma, there's an if there. Well, a lot of people have not come to this point, and therefore they are continuing to struggle in the world, thinking that the world is going to make me Purna. But at some point, a human being comes to a milestone where he says that this is not work. Whatever I'm doing is not work. And this cannot work also. First, firstly, my own experience has shown this. Secondly, logically also, I can reason out that the inadequate me, that any number of inadequate acquisitions in the world can never make an adequate me. The limited me plus any number of limited accomplishments cannot make me free of limitation. And as we said, we can learn from others' experience also. There are many people who are very, very accomplished in certain spheres of life, whether it be in terms of wealth or in terms of position or power or in terms of science or arts or music, whatever you take. And when you look at their lives, there is nobody who really says that I am Purnaha due to these accomplishments. Because no matter what they accomplish in certain spheres, you always, like we said, the deformed ball. Where they see the deformity in some other sphere of their existence, then they invariably still judge themselves as I am Apurva. Therefore, looking at all of this, one truly sees that I can never become Purna. No matter what I accomplish, no matter whatever limited accomplishments I gather in this world of Artha, Kama, and Dhamma, then what do I have to pursue? Only thing that remains for me to look at is the rock. The conclusion that I am Apurva. Is that really true? Exactly like the detective who initially thought that the blind man could not have committed the crime, and he was exploring every other possibility to catch the culprit. But when he exhausted every other possibility, only thing that was left for him to examine was the blind man. The blind man somehow must have done the crime. So for this person now, the only thing left is to examine the conclusion that I am Apurna. Is that really a valid conclusion? Now, fire is hot, it's a valid statement. Sugar is sweet, it's valid knowledge. Because I never see deviation there. Fire is always hot in any time, any place. Sugar is always sweet at any time, in any place. So if it's right knowledge, I should not see a deviation from its nature. If I have determined something to be the nature of something, and that something should not ever deviate from its nature, otherwise it's not right knowledge. If it does deviate. Question is there any deviation in my inadequacy? If I am inadequate is right knowledge, then I should always be inadequate at all times, at all places. I should always have this sense of a lingering deficiency, inadequacy, incompleteness. When I examine this, I find that that is not the case. Because when a desire is fulfilled, in those fleeting moments, when I am experiencing the fulfilled desire, at that point, I see the absence of inadequacy in the same eye where I had seen the presence of inadequacy. So at that point, I am happy. I find no reason to pursue anything to change the world. In fact, I feel that time should be still in those moments. my desire is fulfilled because I feel free of the sense of apurvatva. This is my experience. So I also, so I experience apurnatvam in me. But I also experience the absence of apurnatvam in me. This is extremely important to know. So we took the example of the crystal. Because I had consistently been seeing the crystal as being red. I had concluded that the crystal is red. But then one day I suddenly saw the crystal being blue. So this seeing the crystal as being blue and the redness being absent in the crystal should make me question my conclusion whether the crystal is really red or not. And when I examine this means that the crystal requires examination. What is the true nature of the crystal? Is it red or is it blue or is it something else? And finally, what I find is that the crystal was really colorless. It just took on the color of the object that was placed next to it. Similarly, I have the experience that I am inadequate, but I also have the experience that I don't have this inadequacy in certain fleeting moments. Those fleeting moments are enough to make me question what is the truth about myself. Who am I? What am I really? Because if it really turns out that I am inadequate, the conclusion itself is a flawed conclusion that perhaps the key to my adequacy lies in the examination of the conclusion and the determination of who I really am. That is why the Upanishad says, Atma Bodha Drashtavya. And the Atma, the self, has to be examined, exactly like that poor man who thought he knew everything about the stone. But he had missed something significant. Upanishad is trying to tell me that you have not really known yourself. Atma Bodha Drashtavya. This Atma has to be examined. And the Upanishad also tells me that in this inquiry into myself, in this inquiry into who am I, lies the key to my unconditional fulfillment. Because it says, Shokam Dharati Atma. And the one who has determined that my true nature is such and such, that my true nature is Purnaha, that I am limitless, full and complete. Atmavid, one who has known this, it's called Atmavid. Shokam Dharati Atmavid. Such a person transcends sorrow, goes beyond sorrow, says the Lord. Goes beyond all this struggle, strife, suffering. Therefore, the key to my Purnatvam doesn't lie in the world, it lies in the examination of who I am. This is why self-inquiry becomes important, self-knowledge becomes important. This is why the study of Atma Bodha becomes important. Therefore, now we will enter the text, Atma Bodha. And before that, just a few high-level notes about the text. So as we said, this text is authored by Bhagavad Adi Shankaracharya. And it's an introductory text because of several key features. The first is that it comprehensively covers various topics in Vedanta without adding a lot of bulk. So if you were to compare Atma Bodha to Viveka Chudamani, for example, Viveka Chudamani has about 600 verses or so. Whereas Atma Bodha is a more compact text in that sense. It contains only 68 verses. The second point is that with every significant topic that is introduced, Atma Bodha also gives a very relatable example, which helps assimilate, understand and assimilate and relate to the topic. The mind, when it's given an example, finds that relating to the topic is easy. The third is that the verses themselves are also in a very simple language. It uses simple Sanskrit. And therefore, if somebody has a certain working knowledge of Sanskritam also, and they can also relate directly to the meaning of the verses. And it's in a simple language. And the grammatical aspects, etc., also can be easily understood. Now, comparing this to Tattva Bodha, which is the question Balaji you had in the last class. So Tattva Bodha is a more fundamental text because it doesn't take the knowledge of anything for granted. If it uses a term, it makes sure it defines the term. Whereas Atma Bodha takes certain things for granted, certain definitions for granted. It doesn't get into the definition. It assumes that the student already knows that. And it deals with slightly more advanced topics when compared to Tattva Bodha. So for those who have studied the Tattva Bodha, this will be a good revision. And also one can progress further in terms of the understanding. That's the goal. Now, the other interesting part about Atma Bodha is that there is a tika. Tika means a set of notes or footnotes by Padmapadacharya, who is one of the four disciples of Bhagavad Shankaracharya. The four disciples are Sureshwaracharya, Padmapadacharya, Totakacharya, and Hastamalakacharya. So Padmapadacharya is one of the four disciples who has written a set of notes on the Atma Bodha, which is called the Vedanta Sara Tika. So this is different from the Vedanta Sara text, which is popularly taught, which is like a more advanced, much more advanced Tattva Bodha by Sadananda. There is another text called Vedanta Sara. So this is different, even though it shares the same name. This is a Tika by Padmapadacharya. And during the course of this class, if there is anything that throws light upon certain parts of the verses that are interesting to share, then I will do that as a part of this class. So with this background, we will get into the first verse of Atma Bodha. And I had sent a PDF. Right now it just has that one verse, but we will add to it as we move along. So you can use that for chanting. And Sharada ji, you can repeat after me. Tapobhihi kshina papanam.
Tapobhihi kshina papanam.
Shantanam vitaraginam.
Antanam vitaraginam.
Mumukshunam apekshyoyam.
मुमुक्षूणामपेक्षोऽयम्
Atma Bodho Vidhiyate.
आत्मबोधो विधीयते.
So this first verse of the Atma Bodha brings out a preface. Every book that we find has a preface in the beginning that talks about what is the purpose of the book, what is the subject matter, who the book is addressed to, and some background about the book. Similarly, the first verse is a preface for the entire text. And it talks about what we call the Anubandha Caṭuṣṭayam, meaning the fourfold factors that bind the student to the study. When a student opens the book to study, if the preface, after reading the preface, then one gets to judge quickly whether this rest of the pages in this book, whether they are meant for me or not. For example, if a student is in the 5th standard, and then he suddenly opens a college textbook, which is talking about advanced topics, and in the preface itself, he will see that no, this is not interesting. He keeps it, goes through and does something else more interesting. So, the preface, the Anubandha Caṭuṣṭayam, talks about 4 topics. Only when these 4 topics are clear, a prospective student becomes a committed student of the text. These 4 topics are called the Prayojanam, Viṣayaḥ, Adhikāri, and Sambandhaḥ. What is the Prayojanam of the study? What is the benefit? That's the first subtopic. The second is Viṣayaḥ. What is the subject matter that is being presented in the book? The third is the Adhikāri. Who is the candidate for the study? And the fourth is the Sambandhaḥ, meaning the relationship of how the study of the subject matter will lead to the Prayojanam, the benefit. So we'll start with the Prayojanam. What is the benefit? And as we have seen, the text is titled Atma Bodha, meaning self-knowledge. So the Prayojanam of this is that it leads to Atma Bodha, self-knowledge. But a human being is not really interested in the self-knowledge as an end. Everybody asks to begin with why self-knowledge. Like we saw in the first class, we started with the question of this person asking, why do I need self-knowledge? Person sees the value of self-knowledge only when person understands that through self-knowledge, what I gain is the Purnatva that I have been seeking all of my life through various pursuits of Artha, and Dharma, and I have been unsuccessful in getting there. That same Purnatvam that I have been desperately seeking all my life through various pursuits and have been unsuccessful at it, that is what I gain through this self-knowledge. So exactly like the poor man who was suffering from poverty, struggling as a result of poverty because of his gem ignorance. Because there was gem ignorance. Because of gem ignorance, he mistook it to be a worthless stone and he was struggling in poverty. But the moment he got the knowledge that this is indeed one of the most precious, invaluable gems, the right knowledge. When he got the right knowledge, that removed his judgment about himself being poor and also his struggles due to poverty. Similarly, a human being, I have mistaken the Purna Atma. I have mistaken the Purna Atma due to self-ignorance. I have mistaken the Purna Atma to be Apurna. And then I am struggling because of this Apurnatvam. I'm struggling in the world between the rock and the hard place. So the right knowledge is that I am Purnaha. When this I am Purnaha, self-knowledge rises, then it removes all of this struggle due to Apurnatva that this person is facing in the world. So this is the benefit. This is the Prayojanam of the spirit. Then the next question is, what is the Viṣayaḥ? What is the subject matter? So the verse itself says, Ayam Atma Bodha Vidhiyate. Ayam Atma Bodha. This text titled Atma Bodha Vidhiyate is being prescribed. What is the subject matter? The subject matter is the Atma, the I, not some object in the world or how to fix up objects in the world so that I can gain Purnatva. No. It's not about how change my boss so that he starts behaving appropriately to me so that I can become Purnaha, or not about changing my mother-in-law, or not about gaining more wealth to become Purnaha. No. It is strictly about examining who I am. So the subject matter is the Atma, this I, self, and how this Atma is already Purna, already full, complete, limitless. And this Atma Bodha, I am Atma Bodha, Vidhiyate, is being prescribed like a doctor writes a prescription. Looking at the patient, he understands what is the medicine that is required. So Bhagavad is saying, Atma Bodha Vidhiyate. If you are the candidate, if you are the right Adhikāri, then this text is prescribed. So then there's a question that arises here. That Bhagavad Shankaracharya himself has written these extensive bhashyas, commentaries on the Upanishads, on the Brahma Sutras, on the Bhagavad Gita. Elaborate commentaries. So then why do we need another text? Should he compose Atma Bodha? So this, really speaking, this is why the Anubandha Caṭuṣṭayam is there. Why is this text required? There are other texts that are addressing the similar market, so to say, in modern terms. And why do I need another product? How do you differentiate this from what is already there? So this question is answered by Atma Bodha in the Tika. So we will briefly refer to that. So if we look at the Tika, and the structure of the Tika is that there are all these Atma Bodha verses at the top, and then underneath that line, we see the Tika for those verses that are at the top, the explanation of those verses. So here, uh, Padmapadacharya starts with a certain Mangala shloka and then gets into the Tika. So we will read the Mangala shloka also. Since we are going to be referring to the Tika, we will not be doing the Tika completely, or even most of it we may not touch. But since we are going to look at some interesting parts of it, we will read the Mangala shloka also. So the Mangala shloka is below the line that says Śrī Padmapadacharya Virachita Vedanta Sara Tika Sahitaha. Below that is the Mangala shloka. Sharada ji, you can repeat this also after me so that we gain some familiarity with this shloka also. Shatamaka Pujita Padam
शतमकपूजितपादम्
Shatapatha Manasopya Gocharaakaram
शतपथमनसोऽप्यगोचराकारम्
Vikasita Jalaruhanetram
विकसितजलरुहनेत्रम्
Uma Chayagamasraye Shambhum.
उमाच्छायाङ्कमाश्रये शम्भुम्.
So here, this verse is a salutation to Lord Shiva. Padmapadacharya starts with Shatamakha Pujita Padam. Shatamakha refers to Indra. Indra, who has done, whose position is gained by doing these 100 Ashwamedha yagas. Makha refers to an Ashwamedha yaga. So Shatamakha refers to Indra, and the one whose feet are worshipped by Indra. Shatamakha Pujita Padam. Shatapatha Manasopya Gocharaakaram. So the mind goes in 100 directions. The mind can go in 100 directions. But even by the mind, one who cannot be comprehended. Shatapatha Manasopya Gocharaakaram. And Vikasita Jalaruha Netram, one whose eyes are like a fully bloomed lotus. And Uma Chayangam Ashraye Shambhum. Uma Chayangam, on one on whom Uma, meaning Parvati. Parvati is by the side of Shiva. So on his anga, the shadow of Parvati falls, because Parvati is by his side. So to such a Shiva, I am taking refuge. Ashraye Shambhum. This is the high level meaning of the word. We will not get into a lot of grammar specific details here, because that is not our primary purpose. But the next line we will just read that. And I will just read this myself. You don't have to repeat after me. Which answers the question about why is Atma Bodha authored by Bhagavad-pada, even though he has written all these bhashya. So Padmapadacharya says here, Tatra Bhagavan Shankaracharya Uttamadhikarinam Vedanta Prasthanatrayam Nirmaya Tad Avalokana Samarthanam Andabuddhinam Anugrahartham Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Sangraha Dhanam Atma Bodha Prakaranam Vidarshaishu Utijanite Tapobhiriti. What Padmapadacharya is telling us is that Bhagavan Shankaracharya Uttamadhikarinam Vedanta Prasthanatrayam Nirmaya, meaning that Bhagavad-pada Shankaracharya has already written his bhashyas, elaborate commentaries on the Prasthana Trayam, meaning the Upanishads, Brahma Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita. So then why this prakaranam? Why Atma Bodha? Tad avalokana samarthanam mandabuddhinam. Meaning that the bhashyas, to enter the bhashya requires a certain set of qualifications. Not everybody is qualified or is capable of understanding the deep meaning that Bhagavad is presenting in the bhashya. There are a lot of barriers, and the first barrier is certainly the language also. Because the language in the preliminary texts are a lot more simpler compared to the language in the bhashya. So tad avalokana samarthanam mandabuddhinam anugrahartham. So those who are not capable of understanding, entering and comprehending the bhashya, in order to bless those kanishtha adhikaris, those who are not as qualified. Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Sangraha Dhanam Atma Bodha Prakaranam Hidarshaishu Tijanite. So Bhagavad is presenting the Atma Bodha Prakaranam. It is the Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Sangraha Dhanam, meaning that it contains the wealth of the teaching of Vedanta. It is being presented for those who are not, who are the Manda Adhikaris or the Kanishta Adhikaris. So this answers the question about why this text is required. So then we get into the topic of the Adhikāri. Who is the candidate? Who is the Adhikāri for whom this text is meant? The first verse also indicates what are the qualifications the Adhikāri has and also how to gain those qualifications. So Jnana Yogyata and Jnana Yogyata Sadhanam. What are the qualifications and how to gain those qualifications? So when we look at the Vedantic pursuit, there are 4 aspects to it. The first is coming to understand that I am really seeking Purnatvam and I don't want a Purnatvam. And also understanding what does not and cannot lead me to Purnatvam. One has to have some understanding of this. And also, of course, what can lead me to Purnatvam. This is what we call discrimination, viveka. The second aspect is once I have understood that something cannot lead me to Purnatvam, then not clinging to, not longing for, not depending on that which cannot lead me to Purnatvam. This is called dispassion or vairagyam. So that is indicated in this verse by vitaraginam. Vitaraginam refers to one with vairagyam. And the third thing is certain disciplines are required in any pursuit. And that is what we have seen as Shamadhi Shatka Sampattihi, Shama, Dhamma, Tiksha, Parama, Shraddha, Samadhan. That is indicated here as Shantanam. Through the word Shantanam, it indicates the disciplines. And the fourth is the longing for Purnatvam and the longing to pursue the means that will lead me to Purnatvam. That is what we have called mukshitvam. And that is mentioned in the word as mukshunam. So vitaraginam, shantanam, mukshunam. So the vivekaha is not directly mentioned in the words, but it is implied. Who is the candidate? Who is the Adhikāri for whom the text is meant? Mumukshunam apekshyoyam Atma Bodho vidhi. Mumukshunam apekshyoyam is meant for mumukshu. Who is a mumukshu? Moktum ichuhu mumukshu. Moktum ichuhu mumukshu means one who is desiring freedom. One who wants freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from samsara. What is samsara? Samsara is the endless struggle to gain purnatvam out of the first three purusharthas of arthaha, kamaha, and dhamma. So he has understood that this struggle is endless. It is not going to lead me to purnatvam, where the vivekaha comes in, because viveka has to come before the moksha. The discernment of this problem of samsara is viveka. So, exactly like one has to discover hunger before food becomes relevant, one has to discover the problem of samsara before moksha becomes a relevant pursuit. Moksha is another name for this purnatva. Identity. So only when one has discovered the problem of samsara, only then will there be an urge to be free of this. That is why the discovery of the problem of samsara is important. One is seeking, the mukshu is one who is seeking freedom from samsara. And it also means freedom from apurnatva. Because throughout his life he has been seeking freedom from apurnatvam, but through the pursuits of artha, kamaha, and dhamma. But then after struggling a lot, he comes to the understanding that the inadequate I remains inadequate no matter what I accomplish in the field of artha, kama, and dhamma. And therefore now this freedom from apurnatvam has to be sought not by more pursuits of artha, kama, and dharma, but by examining the very conclusion that I am purna. So the mumukshu is one who has discerned the problem of samsara and wants to be free of it, not by more artha, kama, and dharma pursuit, but by examining the conclusion that I am apurna. This is the mumukshu. So an adhikari is a mumukshu. Adhikari for Atma Bodha is a mumukshu. Plus, he gives a few other adjectives for the mumukshu. Mumukshu plus a few other qualifications that are described here as the adjectives Shina Papanam, Shantanam, Itaraginam. Then, what does Shina Papanam mean? So, Shina Papanam literally refers to those whose papas are exhausted. So papa refers to the adrishtam, the unseen effect of an adharmic action. It is like a seed that is planted because of the commission of an adharmic act. A seed gets planted that in future manifests as dukkha. So that seed that gets planted as a result of adharmic action is papa, literally. And such papa if accumulated, it not only brings unconducive situation in the future in terms of the material pursuits, but it can also bring unconducive situation in the future for or which obstruct the spiritual pursuit also. So the Papa can create material obstructions in the future or spiritual obstructions in the future. When we see a person who is not at all interested in spirituality, is purely a materialist. Vedantic explanation for that situation is that it is a result of Papa. So that is what Papa literally means. But here there is a certain special meaning of Papa that again Padmapadacarya brings out in the Tika. So there Padmapadacharya says, Tapobhihi kshinani papani ragadyantakarana doshaha yesham. Tapobhihi kshinani papani ragadyantakarana doshaha yesham. So here papani ragadi antakarana doshaha, says Padmapadacharya. These papas are the defects of the intellect itself. Says. Defects of the intellect, like raga, dveshas, etc., that are obstacles to one's spiritual progress. That is what Papa here really means. So we have seen papas that are about to fructify, the prarabdha papa, that creates defects in the intellect that obstruct spiritual progress. So that is one meaning of papa. That which creates the defect of the intellect that obstacles spiritual progress. But here Padmapadacharya is telling us that the Papa, the defect of the intellect itself, he is calling Papa. The defect of the intellect, like raga, dveshas, etc., that obstruct one's spiritual progress are the Papas. So in some ways you can think about the qualifications that make one progress spiritually. That's what we have talked about. The sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, etc. The opposite of sadhana chatushtaya sampatti would be what? That would obstruct spiritual progress. So that itself is the papa here. So Shila Papanam are those for whom such defects of the intellect that obstruct the spiritual progress are absent. Or in other words, they have the qualifications that are required. So what are the defects of the intellect that obstructs spiritual progress? In some way, if we look at it, suppose there is a pond and I have to look at the bottom of the pond. And if the pond is muddy or if the pond has got a lot of ripples, then I cannot see the bottom of the pond. But if something is done to clean the pond, let us say, pond is cleaned up. And then on a day when it's not windy, there are no ripples in the pond. You can very clearly see the bottom of the pond. So now the candidate here has to do Atma Vichar. I have to inquire into who I am. So if I compare myself to this pond, then I have to look at the bottom of what is there. Who is this I? So if I have to be able to do this fine inquiry, then I have to be free of the impurities like the mud and ripples. Only then I can see the bottom of who I am. So to become an Adhikāri for Atma Vichara, I have to free myself of the impurities and the disturbances. And we can classify the impurities of the mind, the obstacles to self-knowledge as threefold. One is called Malaha. Second one is called Vikshepaha, and the third is Avaranam. So Malaha refers to the impurities of the mind that are not directly perceptible, but which can be inferred. Because one is engaging in Nishiddha karma, the prohibited actions, or adharmic actions. Or there is a lot of attraction to sense objects. Or then there are these thoughts that arise in the mind and lead one astray. So the presence of these pursuit of adharmic actions, or the attraction to sense objects, or the pursuit of thoughts, lots of thoughts, disturbing thoughts, or thoughts that lead one astray. All of this is indicative of the presence of malaha. And we say that this malaha is removed through karma yoga, through the practice of karma yoga. And then there is the second impurity of the mind, which is an obstruction to gaining self-knowledge, which is called vikshepaha. Vikshepaha is just constant preoccupation of the mind, and is jumping from one topic to another. This is vikshepaha, and it is removed through the practice of upasana yoga. And then the third obstacle to self-knowledge is the ajnanam itself, the Atma Ajnanam, the self-ignorance, which is called avaranam, because it hides the true nature of the self. So we say that this particular impurity of the mind goes only through the study of Vedanta. So Shina Papanam refers to those who have reduced two out of these three impurities. Two out of these three impurities. So when we say two out of these three impurities, we are referring to mala and vikshepa. Then the only impurity left is the avarana, or the self-ignorance. So such a person who is reduced in malaha and vikshepaha, and then the only primary impurity that is left is the self-ignorance, is an ideal candidate for the study of Vedanta. You say self-ignorance is gone, that means this person cannot be a candidate for the study of Vedanta. Candidate for the study of Vedanta has to be self-ignorant. He is already a jnani and no longer a candidate. So the two impurities that are gone, if we give the multiple choice question, which of the two impurities are removed? You should make sure self-ignorance is not a part of it. The self-ignorance is intact. Earlier, before becoming a candidate for the study of Vedanta, this person was turbulently self-ignorant. But after becoming an Adhikāri, he is quietly self-ignorant. That is the difference. This quietly self-ignorant person is the candidate, the Adhikāri being referred to here, the Shina Papana. So this is something like when a surgery has to be done, then the certain parameters have to be in control. If I have to do a surgery, your BP and blood pressure and sugar levels have to be in control. If the BP and sugar levels are all over the place, no doctor will touch this patient. The surgeon. Say you fix the BP and sugar and then come back to it. Similarly, mala and vikshepa are all over the place. Then this surgery of Vedanta that removes this self-ignorance, it will not work. So for a turbulently ignorant person, Vedanta will not work. In fact, he will not even entertain the prospect of studying Vedanta. This is what happens if we are talking to a highly materialistic person and he asks, so what are you up to? We say, I'm studying Vedanta, let us say. Then he moves on to the person next by, which stocks are you buying now? This conversation gets cut off right here. He doesn't even entertain that conversation. Why? Because he sees this is not useful for me. I have to engage in the word. So Shina Papa is one who is quietly self-ignorant. And this is what is called Chitta Shuddhi also. Sadhana Chatushte Sampannaha is one who has taken care of the Malaha and Vikshepa. And when Malaha and Vikshepa are taken care of, the Sadhana Chatushte Sampatti begins to manifest in such a way. This is Shina Papa now. Then there is Vitaragina. Vitaragina. So those who have neutralized intense likes and dislikes, raga, dvesha. Vidataha, ragaha, yesham, te, vitaraginaha, yesham, vitaraginam. Meaning that those from whom his raga, dveshas have departed. Departed meaning that they don't have control over the personality anymore. Intense likes and dislikes don't drive what this person is doing because they are not there. Why are these ragas and dveshas a problem? Intense likes and dislikes, why are they a problem? Because when there are intense likes and dislikes, then what I am looking at is a highly subjective world. Looking at a highly subjective world, saying that I like this, I don't like this, and I have to pursue this, I should run away from this, or I should fix this. That is the kind of thinking of this person. So they make me dependent upon the world for fulfillment. Because when strong likes and dislikes are there, and there's a strong idea that I like this, I don't like this, then my fulfillment becomes dependent upon the world. It's the opposite of Vairagyam. What is Vairagyam? Not depending on, not longing for, not clinging to objects of the world, people in the world, situations in the world. And when there is strong raga and dvesha, it is the opposite. I am clinging to objects, people, and situations because I see them as the source of my fulfillment. So these ragas and dveshas whip the jiva into action. They make him very restless. Don't let him be at peace. It's like a pressure cooker in which a pressure is building up. It has to release the steam. There are the intense likes and dislikes. Unless the jiva engages in the pursuit of the object of the likes and dislikes, to acquire the object of the like or to dismiss the object of the dislike, jiva cannot be at peace. It will be very restless. So the world baits me when there are intense ragas and dveshas. And when such is the situation, then the teaching of Vedanta cannot work because the mind is disturbed and restless. As we have seen, in a disturbed and restless mind, teaching cannot work. If my hands are bound by a rope, the bind is very, very tight. Then even if I have scissors, a pair of scissors in my finger, I cannot cut the rope. I cannot free myself. So, the final solution to freedom from ragas and dveshas is the teaching of Vedanta by which I recognize my own Purnatva. Then the ragas and dveshas lose their hold on me completely. But then, until that happens, if there are strong ragas and dveshas, the teaching cannot work. Even though the scissor is there, it is ineffective. It cannot cut the bonds that are tying me down. The only solution, intermediate solution, is to loosen the holds of the ragas and dveshas. The ragas and dveshas have to become preferences. When ragas and dveshas become preferences, then I say, yes, I have a preference that this be the situation. Object be like this, person be like this, the situation be like this. But if it is not like that, it still doesn't disturb my mind. I say, okay, world is like that. This is Vairagyam. So I have to come to this point where the ragas and dveshas are converted into preferences. Ragas and dveshas become disempowered from creating a hold on my personality. This is the Vitaragi. This is the person being referred to here. So Mumukshunam, Shinapapanam, Vitaraginam, where for one whose ragas and dveshas have been converted into preferences. And then Shantanam. Shantanam refers to one who has Shama. Shama is one of the Samadhi Shatka Sampatti, one of the sixfold disciplines. Shamaha is Mano Nigraha, a restraint of the mind, the ability to ask my involuntary thoughts to vacate the mind. One whose ragas and dveshas are converted into preferences alone can ask involuntary thoughts to vacate the mind. The ragas and dveshas are strong. And those ragas and dveshas capture the mind. If the like is there, the object is there, then the mind becomes very restless. If such a person says, I have to work on something, then the person is not capable of asking the involuntary thought to vacate the mind. Why? The mind has been taken over. Like we discussed, the person renting a house but refusing to vacate. Shamaha means that the ragas and dveshas have been neutralized to a certain extent. That is when one can ask the involuntary thoughts to vacate. So Mano Nigraha. But Shamaha here is a placeholder for the other six disciplines also. Damaha, the restraint of the senses from contacting the disturbing, provocative, or addictive parts of the world, because those parts of the world can create the involuntary thoughts that then refuse to vacate. So Damaha is restraint of the senses, Chakshuradi Bahyendriya Nigraha. Then Uparamaha is the mind not being extroverted. Bahya Analambanam Vrittehe, where the the thoughts in the mind are not extroverted. Where one is able to maintain this quietude for a long period of time in order to focus on the study of Vedanta. Uparama. Anantitiksha. Shitoshna Sukhadukhadi Sahishnutvam. The ability to withstand the ups and downs of life without complaining, conserving the mental energy. And Shraddha. Guru Vedanta Vakyadishu Vishwasa Shraddha. Giving a benefit of doubt to the words of the Guru, the words of Vedanta. Samadhanam Chittaikagrata. Where the vikshepa is not there, mind is not jumping from one topic to another, is able to focus on a certain topic. So all of these qualifications are hinted here through Shantama. This is the Adhikāri. Obhihi Kshina Papanam Shantanam Vitaraginam Mumukshu. So we have looked at three of the Anubandha Caṭuṣṭayam, three factors of the Anubandha Caṭuṣṭayam. The Prayojanam we have seen. The Prayojanam is Atma Bodha. Prayojanam is self-knowledge, which is the Avantara Prayojanam, the secondary Prayojanam. And through that self-knowledge, I gain Purnatvam, which is the Mukhya Prayojanam that I am of. Main Prayojanam. This is the Prayojanam. And then we looked at the Viṣayaḥ. The Viṣayaḥ is not some object in the world or how to fix objects in the world. It is this I, the very subject, the Atma, and how the Atma is Purnaha. This is the Viṣayaḥ. And the Adhikāri, we have seen the Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampanna Adhikāri, Mumukshuhu, who is a Vitaragi, for whom these defects of the intellect, papas, that obstructs his spiritual progress are not there. Shine papa. Shantanam, who has Shama, etc., the sixfold disciplines. Vitaraginam, who have neutralized the ragas and passions. This is the Adhikāri. And then what is the Sambandhaḥ? The Adhikāri has to be clear about the Sambandhaḥ between the study of the text and the Purnatva, the benefit. So we say that only when this relationship is clear, one takes to the study. We say that there is a relationship between the text, study of the text, and the self-knowledge. It is the producer-produced relationship. The text is a producer, the self-knowledge is a produced. What is the connection between the text and the subject matter? It is the revealed relationship. The text is the revealer. Atma, the true nature of Atma, is what is revealed. And then between self-knowledge and Purnatvam, it is a sadhya sadhana sambandha. Self-knowledge is the means, and Purnatvam is the goal. So this is the sambandha. And the very next verse gets more into more into the sambandha. It just doesn't say that knowledge is a means, self-knowledge is the means for moksha. It doesn't stop with that. It says self-knowledge is the only means for moksha, only means for purnatva. This is the second verse. But before we get to that, we have left one word in the first verse, which is tapobhihi. The tapobhihi is a very significant word. It tells how these qualifications are gained. It is tritiya bahuvachanam of the word tapas, third case plural, which indicates that is the means for gaining these qualifications. Tapobhihi, through tapas, these qualifications have to be gained. And this tapas refers to the various sadhanas, the sadhanas of a religious life that involve karma yoga and upasana yoga. This is how an adhikari becomes an adhikari. So we will touch upon this topic in the next class, then move to the second verse. We conclude the discussion today. Om Purnamadaഃ Purnamidః Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Śrī Gurubhyo Namaḥ. Hari Om.